Hey, beautiful, please consider subscribing to our channel if you've been enjoying these stories. Your support helps a lot. Aid us in reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The sky was split with amber streaks as the sun dipped low over the pasture, and the air smelled of warm hay and diesel and summer sweat and silence until a crack like a whip shattered the calm, and then came the siren and the frantic bellow of Buster. I dropped the feed bucket where I stood and ran, and my boots pounded the dry earth as dust kicked up around me, and my heart thundered louder than the alarm echoing from the barn. Buster was gone. The gate was swinging wide, and the electric fence wire hung like a limp ribbon, split clean in two. I vaulted the paddock rails and scanned the far pasture and caught a glimpse of him between the oaks, his massive frame barreling toward the tree line, and beyond that, the hills, and then the cul-de-sac, and then people. I cussed and fumbled for my ATV keys, and the engine roared to life as I kicked up gravel racing after him with the wind in my ears and the stench of panic in my nose. That bull wasn't mean by nature, but spook him and he'd charge. A tractor. And right now, something had him riled, and all I could picture were kids on bikes and retirees walking dogs, and Buster in the middle of it all. I caught up near the edge of the HOA neighborhood, where white fences marked the boundary of civility, and everything smelled like synthetic flowers and fresh asphalt, and Fearbuster pawed at the ground near a hydrangea bush, his snorts rhythmic and low as I eased out of the ATV, speaking soft and slow, bucket in hand. He turned at my voice, muscles twitching, his eyes wild and foam flecking the corners of his mouth. I shook the bucket once, and he hesitated, then took a step, and then another, and I inched backward toward the trailer gate, praying. It took 20 minutes to coax him in. But it felt like hours, and when I finally latched the gate and turned around, I was met with a voice sharp as barbed wire. "You need to get that beast off our property before I call the sheriff." She stood with arms folded like a judge handing down a sentence, her tennis visor perfectly centered and lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I knew her face, though we'd never spoken. Karen, president of the HOA, the enforcer of lawn lengths and mailbox colors, the self-appointed queen of Stone Creek Ridge. She didn't flinch as I stepped forward, dust and sweat clinging to every inch of me, and I said, "That beast wouldn't be out here if someone hadn't cut my electric fence." She blinked slowly, and then the smirk returned. "I did, just. Like that, no shame. No hesitation." I stared at her, trying to process the stupidity of it all. "You what?" She waved a manicured hand toward the hills, like the scenery offended her. "That fence was hideous. It ruins the view from our walking trail. I gave you a warning. I assumed you'd comply. When you didn't, I took matters into my own hands. You trespassed and cut a live wire controlling a containment gate for a 1,000-pound bull." "Containment gate?" she repeated like the phrase bored her. "Yes, the wire controls the gate lock. It's powered by solar and backed by battery. If the current breaks, the lock disengages and the gate opens." She tilted her head. "Then you should have built a safer system." I took a step forward, then stopped. "The fence isn't even on your land. It obstructs the visual continuity of our community's edge. It's not your community's edge, it's mine. County records prove it. I've got the survey on file. Then sue me." She turned and walked away, heels crunching. On the gravel, as if she hadn't just put lives at risk for a better view, my hands clenched at my sides. The rope burn still fresh across my palm from wrangling Buster, and I stood there, heart-pounding, ears ringing with the weight of what could have happened. She could have gotten someone killed, and she didn't care. She thought her rules were law, her word gospel, and anyone who didn't bow deserved punishment. This wasn't just about offense. It was about control. I turned back to Buster, who was calm now, swaying gently in the trailer, and I rested a hand on the gate. "You and me, bud, looks like we've got ourselves a fight. But this wouldn't be fists and shouting. This would have to be smarter, sharper, because Karen thought she was above. Consequence she didn't know yet, but she'd just sparked a war she couldn't win, and I was done playing neighborly." The next morning, I walked into the HOA office with dirt on my boots and a county survey folded under my arm. The air inside smelled like printer toner and fake lavender, and Karen was seated at the head of a long, polished table flanked by two board members who looked like they'd been called in from a garden club meeting. She didn't even look up when I stepped in. "I've brought official documentation from the county," I said, laying the survey down in front of her. "The fence is entirely on my land. The boundary line stops a full 20 feet from where it begins." Karen glanced at the paper like it was a receipt for something she didn't remember buying. Then she laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but a sharp, shallow one like a fork scraping glass. She picked up the paper, looked at it upside down, and then, without breaking eye contact, she ripped it straight down the center. "You'll still take it down," she said, her smile flat and chilling, "or I'll have it removed myself." "You're admitting to trespass and vandalism," I said, voice steady even as my knuckles whitened. "And you're admitting to keeping a wild animal behind an unsightly hazard that endangers the aesthetic and safety of this neighborhood." I looked around, but the other two board members kept their eyes down like they were made of wax. I left without another word, because there was no point in arguing with someone who believed rules bent around her. That night I drove back from the hardware store and saw the glint of something on the ground near the gate. I stopped the truck and climbed out, and my heart dropped as I found the wire cut again. This time, there was a note, "Last warning." I pulled the trail camera memory card from the oak post and loaded it into my laptop back at the house. There she was, Karen, in a hooded sweatshirt, crouched like a cartoon villain with bolt cutters in hand and a flashlight, clenched between her teeth. She snipped the wire in one swift motion, then gave the camera a little wave before disappearing into the trees. I called the sheriff and gave him the footage. But when Deputy Harlan showed up, he scratched his head and told me not to stir up trouble. "Karen's got friends downtown," he said. "Real tight with the deputy chief, you might want to let this one go." So that was how it was going to be. She could trespass damaged property and endanger lives, and no one would blink because she played tennis with the right wives and donated to the right campaigns. A week later, a customer canceled a bulk order from my produce co-op, then another. Then a neighbor who used to wave stopped and turned away when I drove by at the post office. Someone asked if I was the guy who let a bull loose near the playground. Karen had started talking. She'd told everyone I was reckless and unstable and aggressive. She told them Buster was dangerous and that I'd refuse to cooperate when she politely asked for the fence to be adjusted. She made herself the victim and me the lunatic. It was a lie wrapped in designer fabric, but people believed it because she smiled when she spoke it. At the farmer's market, a mom tugged her kid away from my stall at church. No one sat beside me. I came home one afternoon and the entire east section of the fence was gone. Just gone. Posts, pulled wire, rolled and tossed in the ditch, like Trash Buster was pacing in the pasture, restless and tense, because he could sense it too. There were no boundaries anymore, no walls, no rules. She'd declared war. I stood there under the setting sun, staring at the torn earth and the twisted wire and the empty space where something sturdy and safe used to be. And I realized something. Deep in my chest, a truth as solid as the soil under my boots. Karen didn't care about views or codes or wires. She cared about control, and she would keep pushing until I broke or left or begged. But I wasn't built for breaking, and I damn sure wasn't going anywhere. I leaned against the fence post and watched Buster snort and stamp his foot, and I saw it in his eyes too. We were done playing nice. It was time to show her what real containment looked like, the kind she wouldn't see coming. I spent the next 3 days rebuilding the fence, but this time I did it different. I reinforced the gate with steel brackets and welded a locking mechanism tied to a new electric relay hidden underground and rigged the system so the backup wouldn't break, even if the main wire was cut. Then I added cameras every 50 feet disguised as birdhouses and trail markers and floodlights with motion triggers along the perimeter. But the real work was happening in town. I paid a visit to Randall Green, the county zoning officer, and brought along every permit and boundary document I owned. Randall was an old friend from 4-H, and his son used to ride my horses before the divorce took him, and his ex, to Tampa. When I told him what was happening, he shook, his head slow, like the weight of it pressed on his shoulders. "You've got everything in order," he said, tapping the folder. "And if she crossed the line again, we'll have her, but I needed more than paperwork. I needed public eyes, so I printed a flyer. It had a still frame from the trail cam of Karen mid-snip. Bolt cutters raised a flashlight clamped between her lips. Beneath it, I wrote, "Do you know this trespasser?" and added a QR code linked to the uncut footage. I never said her name, never accused, just asked a question and left a truth. I posted it at feed stores and grocery boards and the diner. I slipped one under every door in the HOA neighborhood at dawn, wearing a hoodie and gloves and leaving no prints. Within 12 hours, the footage was everywhere. Facebook. Pages exploded. Someone made a remix of Karen snipping the wire set to circus music kids at the high school. Made memes. One guy printed T-shirts with her silhouette and the words, "Queen Snip by Sunset." She was a local celebrity for all the wrong reasons, and the comments were brutal. But still, she didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down. I woke the next morning to find a formal notice pinned to my gate in plastic. A cease and desist letter printed on HOA letterhead accusing me of unauthorized security, installations, and visual pollution. I laughed out loud. She was trying to claim my cameras, violated community guidelines even though they weren't even in the community, so I called in a favor from Jenna, who worked at Channel 4, news she'd covered, my harvest drives before, and owed me a piece. I sent her the footage, the notice, and the survey records. The story aired the next evening under the title Local Rancher Battles. HOA over Bullgate Sabotage. It showed the footage, played clips of me and Buster, and then panned to Karen's pristine porch, where she refused to comment and closed the door mid-sentence. The backlash was instant. Even some HOA members started turning. 3 of them called a special meeting. One of them, an older guy named Bill, showed up at my ranch with a 6-pack and an apology. "We let her run things too long," he said. "She scared people into silence, but this went too far. The tide was turning, and I wasn't done yet, because while she was busy screaming about property lines, I'd been quietly working on a different kind of gate, the legal kind. With Randall's help, I filed a formal complaint with the county, then I filed charges for trespassing, property damage, and endangerment. And finally, I sent her a certified letter of my own, demanding compensation for repairs, loss of livestock control, and defamation. I hand-delivered a copy to her doorstep, and when she opened the door, her face went pale. No smirk, no visor, no snide remark, just silence. Actions have consequences. I said, "You should have remembered that before you cut that wire." She tried to speak, but nothing came out. I turned and walked away with the sun warm on my back and the sound of her screen door creaking shut, like the final note of a song she didn't get to finish, but the best was still coming because I knew her ego wouldn't let her rest, and ego always leads to mistakes. The following week was quiet. Too quiet. Karen's house sat still, blinds drawn, no sign of her daily patrols, no HOA flyers taped. To mailboxes, no smug little walks past my driveway. I knew she was waiting, scheming, because people like her never stop. They just reload. I kept my cameras running, and each morning I checked the footage while sipping coffee, watching the mist roll over the pasture, as Buster grunted at the fence line. Then it happened. Tuesday night, just past 1 a.m., the Westgate camera lit up. She was back, same hoodie, same bolt cutters, different plan. This time, she brought a helper, a man I didn't recognize, maybe a contractor, maybe just someone desperate enough to take her cash. They approached the new locking mechanism. Karen crouched and pointed. The man pulled out a crowbar and jammed it into the base of the gate. I watched from the monitor as sparks flew. And then silence. He must have hit the relay, because the electric gate surged and the mechanism blew sparks against the dirt. The man staggered back, clutching his hand and yelling. Karen hissed something, then turned toward the fence line where she thought. The cameras wouldn't catch her, but they did. Every angle in high definition. She started cutting the perimeter wire again, probably thinking she could disable the charge and finish the job, but what she didn't know was that I'd upgraded more than just the hardware. The moment the wire lost current, the backup battery kicked in, and the gate behind her unlocked with a loud snap. Buster had been waiting. He burst through the gate like a freight train, muscle and rage and instinct. Karen screamed, and the man bolted across the field, but Karen froze, hands up, eyes wide. She tried to run, but slipped in. The mudbuster didn't touch her, just cornered her nostrils, flaring hooves, stomping, letting out a deep, thunderous snort that echoed across the pasture, like a war cry. She curled into a ball, screaming for help. That was when the floodlights came on, triggered by motion, and all those high-resolution birdhouse cameras recorded every second. I stepped out onto the porch, shotgun across my chest, not loaded. Just presence. "Call off your cow," she shrieked. Voice cracking. "He's not a cow," I said, "and I'd say he's being mighty restrained considering what you've done." She stammered, trying to crawl backward, but Buster kept pace, eyes locked. Then blew. Lights flickered down the road, and two cruisers pulled up, dust kicking in the beams. Deputy Harlan stepped out, followed by a younger officer, and when they saw the scene, they both froze. Karen on her knees in a puddle of mud, the bolt cutters at her. Side fence wire dangling like evidence from a crime scene. The man she brought was already in cuffs inside one cruiser hands, zip-tied behind his back, yelling about not knowing it was private land. Harlan looked at me. "You got footage?" I nodded and handed him the drive. He took one look at the preview, then turned to Karen. "You're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, attempted sabotage, and reckless endangerment." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, just a squeak as Buster snorted again behind her. The younger deputy led her to the car as she sobbed, trying to wipe the mud from her sleeves. The next morning, the news ran. The footage Channel 4 called it the Great HOA Stampede. They looped the clip of Buster cornering her in slow motion, added dramatic music and a voiceover. Karen became a meme, a cautionary tale. Queen Snip defeated by the very fence she tried to destroy. Neighbors began showing up with pie and handshakes. The co-op reinstated my deliveries. At church, I got 3 hugs before. I made it to the pew, and the HOA board held an emergency vote. Karen was removed unanimously. Bill dropped by again with a grin. "You ever thought about running for the board?" he asked. I told him I preferred my pasture. Later that week, I took Buster down. To the creek, he waded in slow tail, flicking water, eyes half shut like a king surveying his land. I leaned on the fence, watching the current ripple across the rocks. Peace was back, but not because Karen was gone. Because I'd stood my ground. Because I'd fought back smart, not loud. And because when someone cuts your wire, you don't just fix it. You build something stronger. Something no one dares touch again. As I turned to go, Buster looked up and let out a low, satisfied grunt, like he knew, like he'd been waiting for that ending all along.